And judges, would you please introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Marcia Holland, and I'm sitting pretty close to my computer because there were some sound problems earlier. I will serve as the chief judge for this segment. I'm an attorney in Missoula, Montana. I was a practicing career public defender in Alaska before moving back to Montana, and now I teach at the law school here.
Good afternoon. My name is Becca Steinhoff. I am joining from Casper, Wyoming. I am the executive director of the John P. L. Bogan Foundation. Very much looking forward to hearing from you today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Barnhart. I'm currently in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm a lawyer that works for the Indiana Attorney General's office, and I'm looking forward to hearing your comments today.
And if you can introduce yourselves, and if you have a teacher or a mentor or a coach, if you can introduce that person too, or at least acknowledge that person.
Okay, I'm Jackson Peterson.
I'm Swan Doe.
And I'm Tristan Opbrook, and our instructor is Mr. Gainey.
Thank you, Mr. Gainey. Thank you so much. And so we will go ahead and begin. It's Unit 6, Question 1. So I'll be looking at my paper rather than at you for a moment. Thomas Hobbes noted that life in a state of nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. How has the human condition changed over time? And how is that change reflected in our expectations of government? Should the principles of natural rights or classical republicanism guide policy changes designed to improve the condition of all people? What are the most pressing domestic and global challenges facing Americans today and in the future? What policies can you suggest to address them? And you may begin.
The human condition is a broad term that can be applied on a psychological and sociological scale. For the sake of our response, we are choosing to define the human condition as the apparent social and economic status quo at a given point in time. During the foundational years of the United States, the status quo was upheaved during the Revolution, and the colonies were free from tyrannical British rule. Thus, the commonplace expectation of government was that it remained minimal and unintrusive. Though economic freedom was on the rise, the hierarchy of civil society remained stagnant. White landowning men held all the power in the new nation. The first major change in the social structures came with the Civil War. It brought about the Emancipation Proclamation and the subsequent 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Following the Civil War was the American Industrial Revolution, which encouraged the rise of capitalism in the United States. At this time, the average work week was upwards of 60 hours. There was no federal minimum wage, and child labor laws were non-existent, a result of American distaste for government intrusion in the private sector. Economically speaking, no point in American history has seen such a shift in the expectation of government as the Great Depression, which resulted in the passing of the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 and the establishment of welfare programs, a major display of classical republicanism by the federal government. On the social side, the civil rights movements of the 60s advanced the social and economic freedoms of not only Black Americans, but those of all races, nationalities, and religious affiliations.
Looking at the human condition in the status quo, we see that the social and economic issues are closely linked. Advancing forward, the principles of classical republicanism can also be applied in the 21st century to improve the conditions of all people, especially when it comes to one of the most pressing domestic issues today, wealth disparity. The wealth gap in the United States is substantially greater than that in most other developed countries, with the top 10% monopolizing 70% of the total wealth, while the bottom 50% is working with a measly 1.9%. This trend isn't new and is only getting worse. The rich continue to get richer while the poor go hungry. Changes that can alleviate this issue include a more progressive approach on tax policies that reallocate wealth more evenly towards the middle and lower classes, welfare programs to help Americans meet basic human needs, more concentration in public services that help all members in a community, furthering the common good. Additionally, better access to higher education will improve the lives of the working class by allowing better chances for success in the workforce and more opportunities for achieving a better standard of living.
In addition to access to education, as well as wealth disparity, cybersecurity and privacy has been an issue of hot debate in recent years. After 9/11, our government took drastic steps to protect its citizens through the intrusive tracking of our digital footprints. The Patriot Act, intended to prevent terrorism, has foregone people's right to privacy. From the perspective of classical republicanism, the privacy the individual gives up is well worth the protection from preventable terrorism. However, natural rights philosophy argues that people have the right to privacy, and no government, corporation, or individual should be able to take that away. Currently, privacy seems to only be an issue in regards to private corporations. However, this has led to an overreach of power from the government in regards to personal privacy. Worldwide, we are facing another issue that calls for this philosophical argument as old as our nation: climate change. Classical republicanism states that the protection of the greater good for the people is essential, and as such, legislation forcing companies to go green, as well as to limit carbon emissions, are fair and beneficial to society and people as a whole. However, natural rights philosophers see this as an intrusion on their lives. Why should they be required to conform to others' benefit? As we push into the 21st century, it's clear that the protection of the environment has won out over individual freedoms. Policies that could fix the issues of climate change all follow the ideals of civic virtue. Climate deals and limits restrict companies' carbon output, and renewable energy deals nudge them towards sustainability despite what not may be economically best for the company. From the founding of our nation to the modern issues today, both the ideals of classical republicanism and natural rights have guided policy change to help the various social and economic woes of the people. And to say that only one has influenced the nation more than any other or should guide further policy change is historically ignorant. We are now ready to take your questions.
Thanks. Becca, if you want to begin.
Thank you. You note wealth disparity and climate change issues that can be considered both domestic and global. And so you talked about them differently in your response, but what is the balance between considering the domestic issues versus the global issues in terms of advancing the human condition? How do we begin, or what is the balance between those competing interests as we think about advancing social and economic well-being, both within the United States and outside of it?
Well, inside of the United States, when you try to advance the social and economic conditions of the majority of people, we generally follow the ideas of classical republicanism in the modern age. And that is because most of the social issues that the United States are currently facing are in regards to policies that affect all people. And not necessarily because of a lack of their rights, but because of their lack of ability to achieve things in society. Worldwide, we are trying to, we're usually enforcing natural rights philosophy more because we are defining natural rights as a country and especially as part of the EU, and we are trying to define those natural rights across all countries. And so usually a lot of our foreign intervention is in regards to that.
With international issues like climate change, I feel that when we take part into improving these issues and alleviating these issues, we also are helping our own people and alleviating the domestic issues at home as well.
To kind of add on to what Swan's saying, I do think that these global issues that we're looking at should take a little more importance than what's going on here, because a global issue is not only affecting us, it's affecting the whole world. And in the debate in the balance between cybersecurity and climate change, I do think climate change is a little more of a pressing issue that we should be focusing more on.
Thank you.
So is technology an asset or a burden to addressing these issues moving forward?
I think you could argue that it's both. Although technology does obviously come with its own issues like privacy, it has led to a huge acknowledgement of a lot of the issues we have socially. You know, it's really easy to get the word out about social issues. I mean, the entire LGBT movement really pioneered the use of technology to get their word out about who they were and what they needed. And in a matter of 10 to 15 years, we've seen a complete social revolution in the name of LGBT rights in the United States, as well as in most of Europe.
So let me ask a somewhat related question. The United States appears to be moving toward a great divide in terms of polarization. So, and it's exacerbated by social media, but even traditional media contributes to that. How do you get people to listen to the other side or the other point of view? Do you have any suggestions for a mechanism either at the national level or even at the state or local level for allowing at least reasonable voices to be heard from both sides?
I feel a big part of that is it comes back to education and educating our youth. Like in our constitutional government class, we're able to have discussion on issues and have perspectives from both sides, despite our political beliefs. And that is important into how we are gonna like carry out in our country. I guess an issue we're seeing right now is that the politicians, like adults themselves, they're not listening to the other side as we are. And so just improving the education and targeting this education towards the youth and becoming more accepting towards different opinions than our own could definitely help with that.
Additionally, I think discussions that happen in person are very important. A lot of the violence or hatred that you see related to political discourse you see online, and discussing something online is really a lot different from discussing something in person. You don't actually see the person's face, you don't see their actions, and it really allows you to dehumanize them and really demonize them, and especially their viewpoint. And so having discussions in person and live debates are really important to understanding the other side.
I also think we should be looking at social media in general. When we go onto social media, the algorithms really don't have our civil abilities in mind. They're creating echo chambers based on things that we like and things that we agree with. And by basing your entire political views based on what you learn on social media, you're not really exposing yourself to other points of view, which could change your mind. And I think that the algorithms of social media are a pretty big piece of our polarization.
I want to circle back to some of your comments around education. And so you just talked about education and the role that it has in advancing the human condition, especially conditions for all people, which you noted in your response. What is the role of the federal government in advancing education as a way to support all people having access to an education that advances that human condition?
I think the federal government should be guaranteeing that everybody has access to not only just public education, but a quality public education that's free from any sort of outside influence other than facts and history. And I just think that the federal government should be ensuring that everybody is receiving this education and a proper education. And there should be a little more regulation in what we are learning.
And not just only, primary education like high school and all of that, but also secondary education and often to graduate school. I think that higher education is a very important part of what can make a society thrive. And, society can only get better with more engineers and scientists and historians.
And going back to one of the domestic issues that we brought up with the wealth disparity, a lot of high wage paying jobs come from attaining that higher degree of education that isn't accessible to everyone. And so I feel that if the government took measures in order to make that more accessible, that would greatly alleviate the issues.
So one quick question, I think that's all we'll have time for. Should the United States be involved in relationships with other countries who don't follow the same rules, so to speak, in terms of treatment of its population? For example, we do a robust business with China, but we don't always agree with the policies that are imposed by their government. Should the United States continue doing that?
I think that depends on the degree at which human rights are being violated. Like North Korea, for example, most countries have absolutely no contact except for the few, mainly China. I think China is a gray area because although we disagree quite strongly with how they treat their citizens, they are a world superpower, and to completely ignore that would just be irresponsible. And so I think discourse and interaction with China to a certain degree is important.
Okay. If you have a final thought, go ahead. And if this is a good place to stop, fine too.
However, I think restrictions on that as well as trade restrictions can also benefit to try to push them in the right direction.
Thank you so much, and applause. Good job, everybody. Take a deep breath. And so now we'll provide a few comments. It's hard to know where to begin. Your prepared remarks flowed so well from topic to topic to topic. They were clear, they were concise, they were focused. This question is a hard one to answer, and yet whoever came up with the structure for your prepared remarks. Really hit it out of the ballpark in terms of letting us hear the content in a really effective way. It's really kind of a mark of a strong team when you present the balance. Let's look at it from this point of view, but on the other hand, there's this other point of view as well. And that was a consistent approach to several of the prepared comments and then answers to our questions, which is, we want to hear both sides of the story. So thank you for recognizing that there's great value in doing that. And I'm on the school board here, so hearing about quality public education makes me smile. And I'll just throw out there, it took a state lawsuit to ensure a quality public education in Montana, not the national government stepping in, but a group of citizens suing under the state constitution, which was then affirmed by the Supreme Court. So it can be dealt with at the national level, but just throw it out there. Even the state can usually jump in sometimes. But thanks for bringing up that concept. I really appreciate it.
I echo a lot of what Marcia said. You started your prepared remarks with a really clear theme of thinking about the social and economic dynamics of that human condition, and you just weave that throughout, which made it really easy to follow. I thought all of the examples that you pulled in from history to talk about the dynamic and the change of the human condition was really interesting. And it was something that I wanted to follow and hear as you worked your way then into policy. And I thought you had a really nice tie between some of the challenges that you offered and some of the policies that might mitigate or otherwise disrupt those challenges and hopefully improve those social and economic conditions. You continue to make linkages from your prepared remarks into the questions, and that we always like to see that sense of coherence from where you started to how you work your way through those questions. So overall, very well done. Thank you.
I agree. I don't have much to add other than one comment I did have actually in the opening statement, I really appreciated how you defined the question, right? So you defined what the definition was and set the playing field. That is useful for you because you can have a lot of definitions of what exactly that means. So I certainly appreciated you doing that, and it tells me that you thought about it on a deeper level. We've heard a lot today in terms of the in-person response to social media and technology, but we haven't heard a lot about the dehumanization and the demeaning aspect of it. So you brought some aspects, some layers to it that we haven't heard yet, and that's very good. So well done. Good job.
Great job, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.